In the winter of 1943, amidst the icy expanse of the North Atlantic, an American destroyer would soon rise to fame. This was a time when the world was gripped in the chaos of World War II, and the Battle of the Atlantic, fought not on land, but on the waves, was at its height. The Axis powers, led by Nazi Germany, had unleashed a terrifying fleet of U-boats upon the shipping lanes that connected the Americas to Europe. For months, these German submarines had wreaked havoc, sinking merchant ships, cutting vital supply lines, and threatening to starve the Allies of the resources they desperately needed to continue the war effort. Among the Allied forces, a new ship was preparing for a role that few could have predicted. The USS Bainbridge, a Fletcher-class destroyer, was about to embark on a journey that would see her become one of the most celebrated vessels in U.S. Navy history. But like all legends, her story began humbly in the shipyards of the United States. The Bainbridge was launched in 1943, a product of the rapid naval expansion driven by the demands of a global conflict. The Fletcher-class destroyers were designed with speed, agility, and firepower in mind. With a length of just over 370 feet and a displacement of nearly 2,000 tons, the Bainbridge was an agile warship built to outmaneuver the enemy. Armed with powerful torpedoes, depth charges, and a variety of guns, the ship was designed for offensive and defensive combat in open waters. Yet, despite her formidable capabilities, the Bainbridge was still a newcomer to the war, unproven and untested in the unforgiving waters of the North Atlantic. The crew of the Bainbridge was equally green. A mix of seasoned veterans and fresh recruits, many of whom had never seen combat, were now tasked with a mission that would test their mettle. They were about to enter one of the most dangerous theaters of the war, where the enemy operated in the shadows, hidden beneath the depths of the ocean. For them, the battle was not just about fighting an enemy, they were about to enter a contest against time, technology, and the treacherous waters of the Atlantic. The men aboard the Bainbridge would have to rely on their training, their ship's advanced equipment, and their courage to survive and succeed. It was the winter of 1943, and the crew of the Bainbridge was preparing to face the U-boat menace head-on. But before they could engage in battle, they had to first learn to become a team unit capable of overcoming the greatest of challenges. Their mission was clear: find the U-boats and destroy them before they could sink any more Allied ships. What no one could predict was just how swiftly the Bainbridge would become a key player in the war, legend in the making. The Battle of the Atlantic, fought primarily between the Allied and Axis forces from the outset of World War II, was a war beneath the waves. The Nazi U-boat fleet, with its deadly combination of stealth and surprise, had become one of the most effective weapons in the German arsenal. By 1943, German submarines were wreaking havoc on the critical shipping lanes between North America and Europe, threatening to strangle the Allied supply lines and crush any hope of victory in the war. The U-boat menace was no small threat. Adolf Hitler understood that Germany could not win the war through land-based confrontations alone. The Axis powers had to isolate Britain from its colonies and the United States, severing the flow of resources that sustained their war machine. The U-boat, the submarine capable of traveling underwater for extended periods, became the cornerstone of this strategy. U-boats were used to launch surprise attacks on merchant convoys, using torpedoes to sink ships and disrupt the Allied supply network. Between 1940 and 1943, German U-boats sank more than 2,700 Allied merchant ships and warships. They used tactics like the Wolfpack strategy, where a group of U-boats would attack a convoy of merchant ships from all directions, overwhelming the defensive measures of the convoy's escort. These submarine fleets operated mostly in the North Atlantic, a treacherous stretch of ocean where the weather was unpredictable and the vast expanse of water made detection and pursuit of the enemy nearly impossible. For the Allies, the U-boat threat seemed insurmountable. The toll on merchant shipping was catastrophic, and with it, the risk of starvation and shortages in Britain and other parts of Europe. The German submarine successes were only amplified by the technological advantage they held over Allied forces. Their stealth and speed meant they could approach undetected, strike quickly, and disappear before Allied ships could retaliate. But the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic began to turn in favor of the Allies in the early months of 1943. This was a turning point, one that would make a ship like the USS Bainbridge indispensable. The Allies were adapting quickly to the U-boat threat, and it was the rapid development of anti-submarine warfare technology that would level the playing field. Radar, sonar, and depth charges innovations that had been in their infancy at the war's start were beginning to provide a means for detecting and targeting the U-boats with greater efficiency. The USS Bainbridge, with its state-of-the-art sonar equipment and an eager, well-trained crew, was perfectly suited to face the challenge ahead, but there was still much to be done. The Allied navies needed to understand how to combine these new technologies with effective tactics, and they needed to learn fast. The balance between technology, intelligence, and manpower would be the deciding factor in winning this battle. As the war raged on, U-boats continued to pose a significant threat to the Allied effort, but the capabilities of Allied warships like the Bainbridge would soon prove to be a game-changer. The legend of the Bainbridge would not simply be built on its weapons or its technology, it would be built on its ability to work with a larger network of ships and intelligence, driving the U-boats from the seas and securing victory for the Allies in one of the most dangerous campaigns of World War II. By the spring of 1943, the battle beneath the waves had reached a critical juncture. The Allies, determined to gain the upper hand against the relentless German U-boat fleet, were not only relying on brute strength, but also on intelligence and innovation. The tides of war were beginning to shift, thanks to a series of breakthroughs in cryptography, surveillance technology, and naval tactics. As the Allies gained access to critical German communications, a new strategy began to take shape, one that would allow ships like the USS Bainbridge to hunt U-boats with unparalleled precision. One of the most important pieces of this puzzle was the breaking of the German Enigma code. Since the early years of the war, Germany had used the Enigma machine to encrypt its military communications, including messages about U-boat movements and positions. However, in 1941, the British successfully cracked the Enigma code, giving the Allies a significant advantage. By 1943, the Allies were regularly intercepting German communications, allowing them to track the locations of U-boats and predict their movements across the Atlantic. This intelligence was crucial as it allowed Allied warships to set up ambushes, cut off escape routes, and engage the U-boats before they could strike. At the same time, advancements in sonar technology were transforming the way naval warfare was fought. Sonar, or sound navigation and ranging, allowed ships to detect submerged submarines by sending out sound waves and measuring the time it took for them to bounce back. The Bainbridge, like many ships of its class, was outfitted with the latest sonar equipment, giving her the ability to detect U-boats at great distances. This was a game changer. The Bainbridge could now track and target U-boats even when they were hidden deep beneath the waves. But technology alone would not win the war. The true strength of the Allied effort lay in the coordination between ships, aircraft, and intelligence units. The Bainbridge, as part of a larger task force, was now able to hunt U-boats as part of a coordinated effort. This required close communication and cooperation between destroyers, aircraft, and naval command centers. It was a complex dance, one that demanded precision, timing, and seamless integration of technology and tactics. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure were dire. The U-boat menace was not just a matter of military strategy. It was a race against time, and every day the Allies allowed U-boats to continue their attacks, the greater the risk to the war effort. This was the environment into which the USS Bainbridge entered as it set sail for its first real test of combat. With its radar, sonar, and newly acquired intelligence, the Bainbridge was ready to hunt. The crew, though relatively inexperienced, had undergone rigorous training. They knew their ship inside and out, and they knew that their success or failure would not only affect the fate of the ship, but could alter the course of the war. Their mission was clear: seek and destroy the U-boats that threatened to choke the lifeblood of the Allied war effort. As the Bainbridge left port and set course for the North Atlantic, it did so with the weight of history on its shoulders. Armed with new technologies, bolstered by critical intelligence, and supported by an untested but determined crew, the destroyer was about to enter the fray in one of the most crucial and dangerous theaters of World War II. The hunt for the U-boats had begun, and the Bainbridge was poised to become a key player in the battle for the Atlantic. In the frozen expanse of the North Atlantic, the stakes had never been higher. The year was 1943, and the USS Bainbridge's ship that had been forged in the shipyards of America was about to make history. For 12 relentless days, the destroyer and its crew would wage a brutal campaign against the very force that had threatened to cripple the Allied war effort, Nazi Germany's U-boat fleet. The Bainbridge was no longer an untested ship. Its crew had proven their abilities and honed their skills in the unforgiving waters of the Atlantic. They had the equipment, they had the intelligence, and now they had the opportunity to prove their worth. The first challenge lay in locating the enemy. U-boats, with their ability to submerge and disappear beneath the waves, were the ultimate predators of the sea. But thanks to the combination of advanced sonar and intelligence from intercepted German communications, the Bainbridge was armed with the knowledge of where the enemy was operating. The crew of the Bainbridge was no longer hunting blindly, they were hunting with precision. Using their sonar to scan the vast expanse of the ocean, they could pinpoint the location of U-boats that had once seemed invisible. As the destroyer's radar systems hummed to life, it was like a game of cat and mouse. The Bainbridge had become the predator, and the U-boats were the prey. But this was no easy task. German submariners were skilled and dangerous, and they would not give up without a fight. Over the course of just 12 days, the USS Bainbridge would engage in a relentless campaign, hunting down 6 different U-boats. Each battle was unique, each encounter a test of nerve, skill, and technology. The first U-boat was located using sonar, its shape emerging from the deep. The destroyer closed in, its crew preparing for the inevitable confrontation. In a split second, depth charges were launched, exploding beneath the surface with a deafening roar. The U-boat was struck, its hull shattering under the force of the blast. The first kill had been made, but there was no time to celebrate. The crew of the Bainbridge knew that the hunt was far from over. Each subsequent engagement followed a similar pattern: long hours of searching, followed by moments of terrifying intensity as the Bainbridge closed in on its target. The U-boats fought back, attempting to dive deeper into the darkness of the ocean, trying to escape detection, but the Bainbridge was relentless. Using its superior radar and sonar, the destroyer tracked its prey, closing the distance and launching depth charges with pinpoint accuracy. Over and over again, the Bainbridge struck. The explosions that followed were like thunder in the deep, signaling the destruction of another Nazi submarine. The 6th and final U-boat was perhaps the most dramatic encounter of all. After days of searching, the Bainbridge finally located the last of its targets. This time, the U-boat attempted to flee, hoping to escape the tightening net of Allied ships. But the crew of the Bainbridge had learned from every previous encounter. They knew their target's every move, every escape route, and when the time was right, they unleashed the final blow. The U-boat was destroyed, and with it, the Bainbridge had completed its extraordinary mission. 6 U-boats sunk in just 12 days. The impact of this achievement was immeasurable. The destruction of 6 U-boats in such a short period was a devastating blow to the German Kriegsmarine. It sent a clear message: the Allies were no longer powerless against the U-boat menace. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic had turned. No longer would the Nazi submarines operate with impunity. They were being hunted systematically and relentlessly by ships like the USS Bainbridge. The Bainbridge's success did not only lie in its technological superiority or its crew's tactical brilliance. It was a testament to the power of teamwork, the importance of intelligence, and the resolve of men who understood the stakes of their mission. In the span of 12 days, the USS Bainbridge had achieved what few could have imagined. It had become a legend, a symbol of the growing power of the Allied Navy and the shifting momentum of the war. By the time the Bainbridge returned to port, it had not only dealt a significant blow to the German U-boat fleet, but had also cemented its place in the annals of naval history. The ship's role in the destruction of 6 U-boats was a pivotal moment in the Battle of the Atlantic, one that would resonate for years to come. For the crew of the Bainbridge, the hunt was over. But the legend of the ship and the men who sailed in her would live on.